So we're gonna do no props today. Just use our bodies, it'll be wild. But let's start with some standing. A little warm up here. It's starting to get crispy and cold out. Let's go feet a little bit wider. I'm just kind of shifting the hips from side to side. Pretend like you're at the beginning of a music video. We're just looking for a little movement in the side of the hip, especially if it's really tight, right? So abduction, which we'll be doing in our side glute series. We tend to make up a lot of different kind of ways to work the side of the hip versus just activating through the glutes. And then you can sweep one arm out to the side and we'll sweep up and over and take a little side bend here. And then easy breath in, come through center and then try the other side. And so see as your side bending here, if you can press through the heels. So you got a little bit of support in the hip joint here. And nice and neutral. So if you're tucking the pelvis under, just let the bum release. And we'll take this into a little thoracic rotation. So you can either keep your hands by your chest and rotate, or if you want, you can open the arms and then look to the backhand. We'll pass through center. And it's okay if the hips move a little bit for us here. Think of leading from the upper body. So we're rotating at the waist first. And a little bit of like an engagement, tiny squeeze of the shoulder blades together. You'll notice you get just a little bit more out of your rotation. And let's just do one more each way. Inhaling through center and exhaling that compression. We'll give you a little bit more rotation each time. Last one here. Nice, now let's take some shoulder rolls. So just rolling the shoulders up and back, starting to connect in with the shoulder blades. And keeping those in mind as we do some of our hands and knee stuff today. Let's reverse it here. Back and up. Nice. And then let's just turn, we'll rotate to one direction, doesn't matter which side. Easy little bend in the front leg and we'll take some big arm circles. So just circling up and back. If you want a little more, as long as you don't get dizzy, you can add your thoracic spine and your eyes. And then we'll reverse it. So you're thinking of that fascia, like I always think of this analogy of I'm lifting my own shirt in the sense that the fascia from my hip all the way to my armpit is allowed to expand when I'm moving my arm. And then we'll switch to the other side, little knee bend in the front. And then again, sweeping the arm up and back, maybe adding a little rotation. Starting to kind of connect in with, all right, what's holding me up here? So am I sitting in my low back, maybe finding a little bit of core engagement, a little bit of outer hip. And then we'll reverse it here, sweeping the arms back and forward. So we'll do lots of mobilization in the joints today. It's Friday. End of your week, or maybe the beginning of your week. And then let's come back to a wide parallel position. You can out toe a little bit, so if toes out feels more comfortable, it's really fine. But just take a little shift from side to side. You can bring your hands onto your thigh if that's nice. We're thinking about, I'll show from the side here, letting the hip crease and the bum kind of stick out. So it's like you're getting into your squat a bit. I do have more weight in my heel, so sort of like a chair pose. I'm letting the weight sink, getting a little bit of an inner thigh stretch. Maybe you go to a little tap from side to side. Obviously, it's a little deeper range of motion. If the bum wants to tuck, keep in a range where you feel like you can keep your tailbone lengthened. Definitely more spine and core muscles here. Let's just try one more each way. And then we'll sweep the arms all the way up. You can bring your legs a little bit closer. They're pretty wide. Inhale, reach the arms up, and then we're going to do a nice wide leg roll down. So you're going to tuck your chin, let the crown of your head rotate to the ground. Arms can just dangle. If you need more support, you can always hold on to your legs. And then relax the head at the bottom, maybe shaking the head no or nodding the chin yes. Pushing through the feet, lifting the abs, and rolling back up. And we'll do that like 2 more times. So nice and easy, finding some articulation. So from the side here, nodding the chin. If the hips like to go back, got some hyperextension, challenge yourself to put a little more weight into the balls of your feet. And then at the bottom, if you notice you're locking your legs, maybe shift the legs forward or weight forward in the legs just a little bit more, relaxing the head, pushing through the feet to roll back up. Just ragdolling the spine. Last one here. Nice breath in, nodding the chin, letting the shoulders melt, giving that posterior chain a little breath and attention, and then rolling it all the way back up. We're gonna play with a little hip mobility. So I'm gonna come to the front front of your mat. We're gonna move backwards. And we're just gonna do a little march. So for my march, I can push down, I can do no arms, or I can do opposite arm. I find opposite arm is kind of nice because it gets your upper body involved. And I'm just trying to find some mobility pushing through my supporting leg. What is my range in my hip joint today? Secretly balance also. Nice. Now we're just integrating the thoracic spine with our hips here. Let's go for one more each way. Nice. Okay, and then with that same little mini squat in mind, so I'm breaking at the hip joint, like my little chair pose. So I've got more weight in my heels and sticking my bum back. I'm gonna do a little tap back and come back in and switch sides. And I'll just show this from the front for the camera viewers. So if my knee's collapsing in, it's my outer hip that steers, and I've got more weight in the outside edge of my foot and my heel. So that's your supporting glute that will work again on the mat. And now if this is comfortable, you can take it a little deeper, where you can actually bring the leg down into a little mini lunge and come back up and switch sides. So turn up the heat a little bit on the hip stability. We feel some glute work, some quad work. Really important range of motion. We want to be able to get down and off the floor. And then if this is still feeling okay, you're going to come all the way down to the mat. You're going to take your front leg, bring it back, and then switch sides. You're going to tuck your back toes and then push to come back up. We're going to do 3 more of those. So we'll switch sides here. We'll step your opposite leg back, bring that leg back, switching sides, tuck your toes, pushing through that heel. Yeah, and you can always use a chair or wall. You got 1 more each way. So what do we say? If you don't use it, you lose it in terms of range of motion. So it's a lot of work. One of the reasons that we see kind of in countries where they do a lot of sitting on the floor to eat, really old school bathrooms, the pit toilet, they've got really strong hips. When you finish your last one, you can come all the way down to your hands and knees. And feel free to adjust back a little. If you need to pad the wrist or if you need to go neutral, that's totally fine. Try to find a little weight in your finger pads here. Shoulders are stacked forward, so instead of the traps overworking, you're gonna find more tricep and underneath your shoulder joint. We're gonna take 3 rounds of cat-cow. So just easy flexion of the spine, finding your pelvis curling under, and then pushing out of the arms, extending the chest forward. Yeah, and just fluid with your breath. We can coordinate each movement with a breath. I think a good strategy is, could you talk to your pets or like a friend on the phone? That's a good way to notice that your heart rate's in a good place. We're not hyperventilating. We'll do 1 more like this. We'll add a little side bend here. So I'm gonna look towards my left hip as I lengthen my right side. I'm gonna come back to center, and I'm gonna look towards my right hip as I lengthen my left side. And just notice if the elbows want to bend at all. Let's try that 1 more time each way, just getting a little bit of space in between the ribs and the hips. Nice, yeah, using our eyes. And then we're gonna do a little side sweep. So my right hand's my support, my left arm's gonna sweep forward and come all the way back. And then I'm gonna replace right hand with left and try that on the other side. This one's pretty tricky. It's okay if the hips move a little bit. We're gonna go for a range of motion. Push out of your supporting arm so that you can rotate your chest to the side as you swing. Nice, inhaling and exhaling, checking in with that breath, just noticing if you're holding. We'll just do 1 more each way. You're getting a nice little shoulder isometric work, secretly some shoulder work here. Last one. Nice, you're gonna come down onto your forearms. We'll warm up the bum a little bit. So let's take our left leg, we're gonna reach it up towards the ceiling. And then we're gonna lower it back down to tap and then sweep it up. And don't worry if it extends, if it's a little bit bent. We're trying to open up the front of that hip. Try to keep your right side nice and long. And then on this next one, we're gonna keep it up, let's say about a 90-degree bend. We're gonna rotate by pressing the outer hip. We're gonna rotate that knee out to the side and then come back up to our starting position. And I'll show this way too. So rotating it out Yep, and then coming back up. And then how's the supporting team here? So abs are on, shoulders are on. Try just one more like that. Nice, and then you can come down, press back into a child's pose for a moment, relax the forehead to the ground. You can walk the fingers forward a little bit. Breathing into the back, breathing into the armpits. And then let's walk it forward. We're gonna come back onto those forearms. Opposite leg here, we're just gonna sweep it up and lower back down. So kind of for the first one, we're just thinking, can I open the front of my hip, especially if it likes to get really tight? We want to keep an eye on what's happening in the low back. So a lot of times we like to extend the low back as we extend the leg. So see if you can keep the core engaged, but open the front of the hip. And then on the next one, we're going to float that leg up about 90 degrees. I'm going to rotate the leg out to the side and then back up. So this is your side glutes, right? Outer hips working. You kind of warmed them up already in the opening coming down to the ground. Keep an eye on the opposite side. We got two more. Checking in with that gaze somewhere between thumbs and elbows. Last one. Nice, you can lengthen that leg out. You're gonna push all the way back. We'll cross our ankles and come onto our bum for a little ab work. So to start, give yourself a little windshield wiper. If you want more support, you can do hands behind you. If you want a little more challenge, as I sit on my microphone wire, you can keep the arms up here. So we're just looking for good rotation in both directions. Okay, all the way from the hip joint, nice. Let's do one more each way. Okay, so now we're nice and even. We'll bring the feet in front of us, sitting up as tall as we can. If you need a little bit more space in the low back, you can flex the feet. You could always sit on a cushion. We're just gonna roll back until our arms lengthen. And then we're gonna exhale, curl to come forward. So the highlight of this exercise is your pelvis. So my pelvis is gonna roll back and then my pelvis comes forward, right? And then we're just sequencing that. So it's pelvis first, then my ribs come, and then I'm gonna try to curl. So here's where the ab work comes in. My ribs are gonna flex over my hips, and then the whole thing just kind of rolls forward. And then as this is feeling groovy, you can start to get rid of the hands. And generally we're saying it's not super low, maybe like the top of your pants, like the waistband of your pants is about as low as we'll go. Or if the feet start to lift up, if hip flexors get a little chatty, then we'll say, okay, that's kind of our range for this moment. Let's do two more. Exhaling to curl. Easy neck and shoulders, take your shoulders with you. Good. Nice, let's roll all the way down. Nice and slow, you can always use your hands on your thighs if you need. Pull your feet in and then walk your feet a little wider. So they're gonna be kind of towards the outside edge of the mat, a little bit turned out. You're gonna flex your feet. So I'm lifting my toes off the ground. You can keep your arms down, or for more challenge, sweep your arms to the ceiling. We're just gonna press the hips up. So we're just coming right away into a big shoulder bridge. Easy in the ribs and the neck, breathing here. I'm gonna hold for two more breaths. See if you can stay stable and level in the hips. And then on your next breath, you can just set the thumb back down. Relax the toes for a second. Lift the toes back up, we're flexing the feet, pushing up into your bridge. So right away, we're just kind of kicking on all those anti-sitting, driving kind of work life muscles. We're gonna get our posterior chain going. An easy breath here. And then lower the bum back down. Nice. Okay, so you're gonna roll onto your side. You can pick which side you wanna roll onto. We'll do a little twist here. So legs can be about tabletop or a little lengthened away. I'm gonna let you choose in terms of comfort for your back. And then either both hands are forward with palms facing, or if you need a little bit more support for your head, you can always bring that bottom arm under. So I'll leave that up to you. We're gonna sweep the top arm up to the ceiling. And then I want you to try to rotate your rib cage. So I'm reaching my bottom arm forward to where my shoulder blades are gonna be flat on the ground and my ribs are up to the ceiling. So it's a little bit, you might have to kind of work your way into this. And then take a nice breath here. You're gonna exhale, let your hips and your ribs roll you back so that your arm's the last thing to come back over. And we'll try that two more times. So my arm leads first. Maybe I have a little moment of kind of working into flat back on the ground. And then it's my hips, my ribs, and then my arm coming back up. And one more like this. We'll sweep the arm all the way up and over, letting the chest roll open. And then again, working into that flat back position, easy breath, and then dragging everything back up. Nice. And then bring that bottom arm underneath the head, whatever's comfortable, long or bent. If your legs are really tucked, lengthen your legs away just a little bit. So they're slightly bent, but not pulled up too close to the chest. Tailbone's lengthened away from the top of your head. We're going to start with a little float of that leg up. So as I float up and down, we're going to keep the whole leg parallel. So here's your abduction. And then that very first thing we did, warming up. So you can feel kind of where your swimsuit line would be, that thigh bone just falling into the hip socket. And the waist is really long, but a little bit of active oblique on the bottom side. Should feel relatively easeful. And then on the next one, we're going to pause, find about hip height here. You're going to rotate the leg into turn out. So knee up, foot down. And then you're going to rotate the leg into turn in, knee down, foot up. And just playing between these two, you definitely don't have to keep a perfect tempo if one side feels a little harder to find the range on. But just noticing, is it my whole body that's rolling to get the rotation, or is it really kind of my thigh right at my hip socket? And this should start to feel surprisingly fatiguing. No, it's kind of a simple movement in theory. The next time your leg is turned in, so knee down, foot up, you're going to take little pulses up. Nice and sweepy from the hip joint. You're starting to feel some bum here. Maybe for 3, 2, 1, and then you can relax, lengthen that leg out. Do we feel some bum? A little bit. You can roll all the way onto your back here. Before we go to the other side, we're going to take another shoulder bridge. You can walk your feet a little bit closer this time. Again, arms can be down or arms can be up. This time we're going to take an articulated shoulder bridge. So using the core to scoop initially, and then pressing through the feet to lift the hips. It's going to be a little harder, narrower, and then melting the ribs down, but keeping the glutes up for as high as possible. If you feel any knee strain, a couple things you can do. You can always walk your feet a little further away. It's going to be more hamstring, but it takes some of the tension out of the knees. You can also lift the feet a little bit higher if you've got something to put your feet on. And as you're lifting, let's take 3 more like this. Notice if the bum clenches, can you find it that the core is actually drawing in? So it's like you're pulling up the front of your workout pants and peeling the spine up. So all the work just happens underneath without us necessarily having to bear down. And then hips are nice and even, both sides of the torso, nice and long. Watching again, we don't come too high with the ribs or onto the neck. And then we can roll it down. And then on that next one, you can roll all the way to your other side. So arms are reaching, palms facing. Legs can be bent. You can pull them up a little higher, have them a little further from the torso. You're going to sweep that top arm up to the ceiling. And then reach your bottom arm so that you're replacing your rib cage. So if I had an aerial view, you'd be in one stack. Shoulders are flat on the mat. Take a nice breath in. You're going to let your hips and your core and your ribs roll back first. Arm is the last thing to sweep. And we'll do that 2 more times. So arm sweeping up. Really this nice opportunity to stretch the pec in the front of the chest. And then rotating to get the shoulder blades flat on the mat. Easy breath in here, and then hips, ribs, shoulders and hand. Here's our last one. And just for yourself, kind of noticing if you have any similarities or differences from side to side in your rotation, where you feel the stretch, any tightness, any mobility. And then you're going to bring that bottom arm long, and I'm going to flip through this one just so I can see you guys. And we'll do a little side glute work here. So legs are going to be slightly bent, reaching that tailbone long so we're not tucked. And then when you're ready, a little exhale to float that leg up. Yeah, and it's a pretty natural kind of stopping point because you'll notice that the top side of the hips starts to fall into the ribs. You can almost think about reaching your tailbone away every time you lift. little bit of bottom oblique. And if we think about this standing, right, we don't actually have a ton of range moving our leg sideways until we turn the leg out. So it's not going to be super, super high. So if you notice your legs to your ear, kind of look at that foot and question if you're in rotation. And then let's pause on the next one about hip height here. Easy breath. We're going to find our external rotation. So it's our outer hip pressing back, knee up, foot down. And then you're going to rotate the opposite direction, knee down, foot up. And if you have your hand kind of to where that, again, like swimsuit line would be, or like the bottom of a back pocket of a pair of pants, that's where all that rotation is happening versus maybe my hip just rolling back and forth. And then how's the neck? So we're just trying to keep the tension kind of where we're working versus the body loves to assist with other places of tension. Next time you're turned in, pause here, little pulses up. Notice if the foot is trying to do your pulse, keep it right at that hip joint, should start to feel a little spicy. And maybe a little spicier on the second side since that first side is having to support you. Last one. And then you can lengthen that leg out. Nice. All right, we'll roll all the way onto our front here. And we'll do a little supported extension. So hands don't have to be super squished if your mat's pretty narrow. They can be a little wider. We'll go about rib, shoulder distance. And my legs can be about shoulder distance too, parallel, turned out, whatever feels better in your low back. We're gonna find the core and press down through the tops of the feet. So we've got glutes and core to support the low back, right? That counter. I'm gonna roll my shoulders up and back. I'm gonna lift with my shoulder blades and my ribs. And then my head's the last thing to come up. I'm gonna roll back down in the same order. So we're gonna lift ribs first. So shoulder blades come onto the back, squeezing towards your spine, and then sternum and head. And we just wanna make sure that this feels pretty supported throughout the whole spine. So abs and glutes are gonna help assist, pressing down through the tops of the feet, just checking if they start to turn off at some point during this lift. And just watching that neck alignment. So we're gazing just kind of past maybe the front of the mat. If you want to make this a little harder for the next 4, you can either ditch the hands completely or float up, let go of the hands, right? We're turning up the work in the back. So if you've got some neck stuff going on, maybe you want to keep the support. Or you can also take your lift without the hands completely. And we'll just take 2 more here. So kind of pick which of those 3 levels you're feeling ready for. How does the weight feel in the pelvis? Is it pretty even? And do we feel like we're sacrificing height for even work throughout the spine? This is definitely back work, right? Work in the back. So do you feel the work in your back? You are not wrong. On this next one, we'll bring our arms a little lower and you can press back and take a child's pose. So if extension is pretty tricky here, the things that can make extension better are stronger glutes. So strong glutes really support extension throughout the whole spine. And then carefully walking your hands back. Range of motion in the shoulders can also be a component too. Let's flip onto the bum. Let's come back to a little more ab work. So we'll take our half roll back with some fun arm accessorizing. So we'll roll back here, same position. I'm gonna go to a place where I feel like I can hold. And then I'm gonna reach just my right arm out to the side. Nothing else changes. And I'm gonna bring that arm back in. So as you reach the arm out to the side, can you keep everything really stable? So you're keeping an eye on your knees, on your pelvis, you're allowing that shoulder blade to move. You'll notice the less you move everywhere else, the more oblique work this is, right? This is our anti-rotational oblique business. You got 1 more each way. And then bring your hands together. You're gonna roll back just a little lower and we're gonna take some twists now. So now I'm gonna let my spine rotate. Chest is the leader here, moving from the waist. You can always bring those legs together. If that inner thigh feedback is helpful. We've got 4 more. Exhaling to rotate. Can you keep the weight really even? So if knees shift, pelvis is shifting. We're just trying to keep those guys easy. Okay, so you can roll all the way back down again. Pull those feet in a little closer. So shoulder bridge marches. So we'll press the hips up again. You can have arms down, kind of an intermediary that can be helpful as elbows or arms to the ceiling. We're gonna float the hips up, checking in with neck and upper back. I'm gonna push through my left leg and I'm gonna float my right leg to tabletop. Then I'm gonna lower that right leg down. Nothing shifts in my pelvis. Push through the right leg to lift the left leg. And then lower that leg down. So we're gonna go a little slower with our marches. And the reason is every time we come back through center, we've got this nice opportunity to check in with where our hips are, height, making sure that we're not side bending or twisting. I'm gonna think about that supporting leg and glute being what's floating that opposite leg up. We'll go for one more each way. And then with the hips up nice and high, you can sweep the arms overhead, just rest them on the ground, and then roll your spine all the way back down. We'll clasp the hands behind the head here. We'll come into a couple ab preps. So your Pilates crunch. We're gonna nod the chin and exhale to float up, gazing just above the knees. And then see if you can lengthen down in maybe like 2 counts. So if I come up in 1 count with my exhale, I'm gonna inhale and lengthen. And so we're nodding the chin before we lift, or we don't wanna over nod the chin, of course. So think about having a little bit of space, like you could fit your own fist under your chin. Keeping the weight nice and steady between both sides. And then as you get tired for these last 3, really make sure that crunch is coming from the floating rib, sliding down towards the pubic bone, versus just my upper body maybe pulling on my neck. And you get one more like this. And then for the next exercise, you can keep your arms here if that's comfortable. It's gonna make it a little more challenging. If you need more support, you can bring the arms back to the hips. We're gonna come into our imprint position. So that's my flat back position. Versus me just smashing my back down onto the mat, I'm gonna use my obliques to draw my ribs and my hips together. So this idea of I'm kind of pulling up on the front of my leggings. And then I'm gonna float one leg to tabletop. And I'm gonna lower that leg back down. And so the challenge here is, can I keep my core in the same position while my hip is extending and flexing? If this feels like a good place to stay, you can keep going with these marches. If you want a little more, the next time your leg is in tabletop, pull your second leg to meet it. And so now we're just challenging it a little bit more with our toe taps, so that every time we extend and tap, can I keep my core engaged, my ribs from popping, my abs from popping while I'm tapping here? And if this is feeling like too much, then just go with your marches. Exhale is really helpful to draw the core in, right? That natural compression as you're tapping or lifting. So taking our brain kind of, can I get my core to do the work and keep my hip flexor really easy? Let's go for one more each way. On the next one, you're gonna keep your legs up. Take a nice breath in. We're gonna exhale to take a crunch. And then lower back down. Right, if legs in tabletop becomes too much, you're just gonna go through another round of your crunches with your legs down. It's still ab work. Nice, again, keeping that crunch. So it's like the up is the easy part. Can we lengthen in the lower? We've got 3 more, gazing just above the knees. Supporting the head. If the shoulders are tight, you can always bring the shoulders a little bit closer to the ears. Last one here. Nice, and then you can keep your legs up, bring your arms out to a T. Your modified version is gonna be toes on the ground. We're gonna take a twist. So I'm gonna let my left hip lift as my legs float over to the right. They're not gonna go all the way to the ground, but hovering only so far as the opposite shoulder can stay down. And then lifting with your bottom thigh and core, come back to center and try the other side. Just twisting from side to side here. Exhaling, using that exhale breath, right? Natural compression through the core, especially through pursed lips, like you're blowing out a candle, can be a really helpful tool to coordinate the initiation of that motion. Inner thigh, outer hip. Let's do one more each way. Also a good reminder for us to breathe. I know it's easy to be thinking a lot in Pilates. And then on the last one, you can just hug your legs into your chest. Take a couple circles here. And we'll take our same hands on either kind of knee or just below the knee, and then take some little thigh circles, so separating the legs if that feels comfortable in the low back. And if it doesn't, you can stick with legs together. And then we'll go the opposite direction here. And letting those hip flexors release as much as possible. And then with the left leg down, you can either have the left leg bent or long. We're going to clasp the hands behind the right thigh. You're going to draw the knee towards the chest. So whether or not my knee straightens doesn't really matter so much. I'm going to flex my foot. I'm going to try to stretch that knee to the ceiling. And I'm just using my arms to essentially pin my thigh still in space. This is a really good nerve stretch. So if you ever have sciatica stuff going on, now I can point my foot too. And that is the same hamstring stretch actually. So the reason the flex foot feels a little bit spicier is just because we're getting the nerves involved. So feel free to play with a pointed foot if that feels nice to stretch the top of the foot. And then on this last one, if you want to take a couple ankle circles or maybe like crunching the toes, just kind of play around with what's that ankle mobility, because we know ankle range of motion greatly affects our hip range of motion. And then we'll bend to that leg. You're going to take the same leg and let it cross all the way over, coming into a twist. Now, feel free to extend that leg if that feels better than keeping the leg bent in the low back. Letting the head rotate to the opposite arm. And then gently you're going to roll onto the side. So we all just did our right leg. So our right leg is going to be our working leg now. So you're going to roll onto your left side for our second side glute series. So I'm starting with my bottom leg super flexed, really active here, quads engaged. And then my top leg, I'm just going to start with a little lift up and down. So kind of the same piece. You can imagine your heels like tracing a wall. I want to make sure that movement's really coming from the side of the hip joint versus my waist joint, right? So your leg's getting really, really high. Check that rotation and just think of reaching that leg a little bit further away. You should feel this work kind of right at the outer hip. And then on this next one, we're going to pause. We're going to make circles, but we'll make circles slightly behind us. You're going to circle back and behind, and the front of your circle is going to be equal with your supporting leg. So we're going to do circles behind us, leading with that heel, allowing the front of the hip to open. So for these today, we're just biasing the glutes to work a little bit more versus the hip flexors. And then let's reverse our circles. We'll see back first and up and out. So extension and abduction, which when we do a lot of sitting, right, those are the muscles that tend to get to just kind of rest or get really tight. So I'm making them work. And one more like this. Nice. All right, you can roll onto your back. You're gonna bring your arms out into a big T. We're gonna work the same leg. Poor leg gets one more thing. We're gonna do leg circles. So for leg circles, your supporting leg can be bent for more support or long for a little less support. Keep this leg really active if you're gonna keep it long. So still flexed and engaged. My right leg can be in tabletop, circles happening from my hip, or it can be any level of extension. So if you don't have the hamstring length, don't worry, you're just making that circle from your hip. So when you're ready, core is engaged, we're gonna bring the leg across the midline, nice big breath in, and then exhale, sweep the leg out and around. And leg circles are tricky because our whole body wants to somehow tense or get involved. So we just worked the hip. See if you can find those same hip muscles, even in your circle here. And then this is definitely quite a bit of oblique work to stabilize through the spine. Let's try those circles the opposite direction. So we're gonna inhale to sweep the leg out and exhale to reach around. Obviously, speed and range of motion are two things you can adjust. So feel free to make those more challenging or a little more supportive as you need them. And you do have your arms. So if pressing the shoulder blades and the triceps into the ground gives you a little bit more feedback versus kind of palms out and arms unengaged, that's okay. When you finish your last one, you can bend that leg in, give it a little squeeze here. And we'll switch out our leg stretch. So right leg can be bent or long. You're gonna clasp the hands behind your left thigh. We're gonna draw the thigh into the chest. And then when you're ready, you're gonna take those extensions up towards the ceiling. So flexing the foot might be a little spicier, but you're still getting a good hamstring stretch if you wanna point that foot. So feel free to play between. And then just kind of noticing for yourself, is the range of motion harder at the hip or is it harder at the knee extension on each side? We'll play around with the ankle on this last one. Maybe some circles, crunching of the toes. Nice, we'll bend that leg. Let's take it into a little twist. So that leg's gonna cross the body, sweeping the arm up and over. If you want to extend that leg, feel free to extend it out. Just take a couple of breaths here. Reaching that bottom leg long, trying to find some space between your top hip and your rib with your breath. You can imagine if you had like an inner tube, you're breathing into that inner tube. And then on your next breath, so I got my left leg on top, I'm gonna roll onto my right side. I'm gonna do a little 360 here so I can see you guys. So rolling all the way onto your right side, we're gonna do our side leg series, second set. So flexing that bottom leg, getting your thigh really engaged, you're gonna float up and down. Right, and a couple good ways to kind of check in. Hand on hip is always good, little bottom oblique action. If you feel like you can never let go with your top arm, then kind of assess maybe what the spiral is from ribs to hips, because we can sometimes get a little corkscrewy. Doesn't mean this isn't valid for feedback, good for nervous system if you're building strength. You could even float the arm overhead for like a little bit more of a challenge. And then on the next one, let's float up. So we're gonna make our circles back. So you're gonna sweep back first and then coming back only so far as your supporting legs. So we'll keep these a little bit behind us here. And so it's a combination of allowing the front of the hip to open. You might feel a little bit of movement kind of around the SI, that's okay. We're just looking out for like big arch through the middle back or ribs kind of splaying here. And then let's reverse it. How's the breath? So like little breath check for tension. Yeah, nice. Exhales, sighs with your mouth open. Kind of our body's natural way to calm our nervous system. So if we're overthinking a lot, which is kind of what we encourage in Pilates, you can just like, oh yeah, I'm moving my leg in a circle. Okay, one more here. And then take a little rest. All right, let's roll onto our back. We're going to torture this leg just a little bit longer. We'll go into a leg circle. So my supporting leg can be bent or long, but it's going to be really active. So I'm pressing through that heel and getting my glute on. And then arms can be out to a T. We're gonna draw the left leg up, right? Any level of tabletop or up, because it's all about the hip circle. And I'm gonna cross my midline with a breath in, and then exhale to sweep out and around. So really tempting to hike the hip in this one, to use kind of the side of the torso as a means to bring the leg up. So see if you can keep that left hip and left tailbone really reaching down. And then let's reverse this. You can adjust that range of motion. Okay, really good for our hip circumduction. So being able to move through this whole plane is really good to help balance out the hip muscles. Again, you can use the arms a little bit if you need just a little bit more security, really work that supporting glute. Take one more here. And then you can bend that leg, give it a little squeeze. We'll roll all the way onto our front again for a little more extension. We'll take a couple rounds of Superman. So for this, let's say like 6 to 8 Supermans. I'm gonna give you 3 arm options. So arms by your hips are gonna be a little more supportive, especially in neck. We've got some neck stuff going on. Kind of our middle version, cactus arms. The hardest version is the traditional. I just wanna make sure I'm not craning my neck when I'm in this one. 6 to 8. When you're floating up, I'll kind of just demo each of them, but when you're floating up, shoulder blades first, right glutes and hamstrings. It's more about activating the whole back body than it is about getting up super, super high. I love an inhale and an exhale to lower down. You don't need to hold it for a long time. Think of the inhale grows with your lift, and then the exhale, everything lowers back down. The inhale, everything floats up, and exhale, everything releases back down. We just want glutes on. Core is definitely supporting from the front, of course, but we're allowing some openness through the front of the hips. Got your arms overhead and an exhale feels more comfortable for a lifting breath, that's totally fine. And when you finish your last one, we're kind of moving with our breath here, you'll just bring yourself back into a child's pose. If you want to add a little side stretch for this child's pose, you can sweep the arms over to the right and then shift your hips to the left. So you're going to get a bigger stretch through that whole left side body. So left armpit, left ribs, maybe left low back. And then sweeping the arms to the opposite side, you'll shift the hips over to the right. And come back to center for one more breath in the middle. And we'll make our way back up to hands and knees. We'll take a couple of rounds of our bird dog. So checking in again, you've got wrists underneath shoulders, knees under hips. So a couple options here. We can keep the limbs connected for a little more feedback, or we can float up. And then we'll return. See if you can return the limbs with the same amount of stability and precision as they exit. So if they're exiting at the same time, and they come back in at the same time. You might notice we like to return our leg or arm a little bit sooner for more support. Those supporting limbs don't even get a break on the way back in. It's part of the fun of bird dog. Nice, let's try 4 more here. Checking in with the breath, checking in with the back of the neck. We've all probably gotten our fair share of Zoom neck over the last 2 years, so good to notice. When you finish your last one there, we're gonna do a little kind of turn up the heat for the core. So I wanna make sure I'm really stacked over my wrists. I'm gonna tuck my toes. We're gonna do this on the forearms too if the wrists need a break. You're gonna push out of the ground with your arms already, core lifts in, and then we're just gonna hover like 2 inches off the ground. And as we hover, we're gonna try really hard to keep the spine long. Rounding is gonna be a good strategy to kind of get out of the work. And just smooth breath, you've got 2 more. Last one. Nice, and lower the knees carefully. You can cross your ankles, come onto your bum again here. We'll do a couple full roll-ups. Let's do a little teaser first. So teaser is like our half roll back. For this time, we're gonna bring our legs up. So we wanna watch out, boat pose is our flat back position. For this, we want that same curl as we float. We can either stay here or we can go armless, right? And then if we're like, this is really easy, teaser's a breeze, you can extend the legs or extend the arms or do either or. You have a couple of variations to play with. If you're working on teaser, finding that connection of I'm pressing my hamstring to open up the front of my hip a little bit so I can find more of a curl in my pelvis. And we'll hold for about 5 and 4 and 3 and 2 and 1. Nice work, yeah. And then you can open your legs out here, find a little butterfly. Distance is your choice. We're gonna do a little cat-cow. So I'm gonna round my spine back, tucking my chin. I can hang in my arms and get a little shoulder blade stretch here. Then I'm gonna lift the chest forward and pull my elbows back. We'll just do that 2 more times. Does your pelvis move also, or is it just the ribs? So see if you can roll your hips forward and extend the chest. Nice, yeah. Just wanna integrate rib cage and pelvis. And then we'll come into a couple rounds of our full roll up. So if we're working on full roll up, bent legs is a great option. And you might find that bent legs is more comfortable if you've got some back discomfort when your legs are long. On the way up, I can use my legs to help and a little bit of momentum. And if you're feeling pretty groovy with full roll up, right, then we get rid of the momentum completely. Here's your half roll back. My pelvis flips first. I'm going to try to place it down and then one vertebrae at a time. Arm sweep overhead. I'm going to sweep my arms to the ceiling. Here, if I'm really working my full roll up, I can kind of kill the momentum completely, but feel free to use it if you need it. So we'll go for 6 full roll ups. Exhaling to roll up. Nice. And you know, there's always more ways to make everything harder, right? We love that option in Pilates. So if you want to make it a little harder still, you can bring your fingertips to your shoulders. Great way to work on full roll up is do your harder version on the way down. And then you can take your more supportive version on the way up. So arms by the shoulders is a great one to check in. It's adding a little bit more load, right? You can feel where you took a little bit more load behind you. You can also do arms up by your ears. So now I've actually got more of a lever behind me even. So play with a couple of those variations. Got a TheraBand or some small weights. Those can be really nice too and supportive. We've got 2 more. Nice. There's our full integration of our entire ab system, which is cool. Nice. When you finish your last one, you can just stretch your arms and legs into a big star shape. Make a little fist, crunch your toes, and then you can extend your fingers, extend your toes, spreading them out. And we'll bring everything back together here. We'll do a couple more fun core kind of burnout stuff. So we're going to go into a scissor. So for scissors, you can always keep your head down. You can also bring your head up. So for any of these, head down is an option. We're in our imprint position. So here's our flat back position. Legs don't have to be totally straight. The movement's coming from our hip joint here. If you want more of a stretch version, you're going to grab either a calf or back of hamstring. If you want a harder version, your hands are not involved. So they can be behind your head if you're going to be in a crunch or down on the ground. So it's a little harder if you're not taking the stretch version. We're going to go for like 16. So when you're ready, you're going to be in your imprint, float your legs one at a time to tabletop. You got a lot of options here. I'm going to exhale and curl to bring my head and shoulders up. I'm going to keep my crunch. You're going to extend one leg to the ceiling and one leg long if you want your stretch version, right? Or for more challenge, having to just support those legs in space. You're trying to keep the hips really stable, really extending through the front of that opposite hip. You can kick out through the heel if a flexed foot helps you feel that and get you into your glutes. It's an awesome strategy. Okay, so let's go for 4 and 3 and 2. Nice, last one. And then you can hug your legs into your chest. Take a little side to side here. So we'll take some obliques. For this one, we've got 2 variations. We can have our left leg long on the ground, or if we want to make it a little harder, still active through that leg, even if it's on the ground, we can float it up a little bit. So those are our 2 options for this oblique piece. Hands behind the head. My right leg is going to be in tabletop. We'll just take 6 on each side. So I'm going to curl up. I'm going to exhale and rotate my left elbow towards my right inner thigh and curl back down. Yep, floated version. Exhaling to lift. Nice. And you've got 4 more here. Keep reaching through that heel. Last 3. Try to keep that right elbow off the ground, right shoulder off the ground. Last 2. Supporting the head. Last 1. Nice. Okay, before we go to the other side, we have to do some mean ab stuff. We'll take a round of bicycles. So 2 options. You can do your stretch version where you're pulling your leg in, or not your stretch version where your hands are behind your head. Head can be down for either. So again, we'll come into imprint. We'll float both legs up one at a time. I'm gonna lift my head and shoulders. I'm gonna show my lifted version. And then when you're ready, you're gonna exhale and inhale and exhale to switch. And so here's my stretch version if I want more of a stretch versus if I want more work or more neck support. Yeah, as you get tired, notice if you're starting to sit in the shoulders or pull on the head, curl up a little higher, get heavier through the mid-back. You've got 4 and 3 and 2. Last one. Nice, you can hug your legs into your chest. And a little rock maybe from side to side. Now I'll take side 2 of our obliques. So we've just got 6 of these. My right leg can be still active but long on the ground, or I can float it up. Left leg's gonna be in tabletop. Clasp your hands maybe the way that feels a bit odd, just to mix it up here. When you're ready, you're gonna inhale and exhale. Rotate right elbow to left inner thigh, and then lower back down. Option to lift that leg, you've got 5 more. Right, so we wanna make sure we're not just rolling over, but we're actually twisting. So if that left elbow touches the ground, you got 3 more here. Then we know we're doing a bit of a side bend versus a rotation. Last 2. And last 1. Nice work. You can hug your legs into your chest. So we'll lower the legs down here. We'll cross our right ankle over our left thigh. You can bring the arms out to a T. And then we'll take a little twist from side to side. So you're actively pressing that right thigh out. If you want to turn this up a little, you could float the legs to tabletop. And that's just going to increase your stretch. So actively working the outer hip away to get a deeper stretch through the glutes. And then if you want to pause in center, you can thread your hands either behind the thigh or on the shin and draw those legs a little bit closer. You can play with flexing and pointing that top foot. Maybe pressing that top thigh out just a little bit more with your elbow. And then let that right leg cross all the way over your left thigh and let the legs fall to the left. And coming into a little twist, if this is too much in the SI, you can just stack the legs instead. And take a couple of breaths in this twist. Feel free to explore the arm position. Maybe you want to go with a 90-degree bent elbow or arm overhead. And just gently letting the knees come up to center. Uncross that top leg. And then we'll cross the left ankle over the right thigh. Arms come out to a T. And then take that little rock from side to side. So you're actively pressing your outer left hip away to create space through the front of that hip here. Maybe taking it up a little bit, right? You definitely don't have to, and you certainly don't have to do the same thing from side to side if you notice one side's a little stiffer, more tender. And then you can bring your hands underneath the right thigh or on the shin, flexing that left foot, maybe adding that elbow to give a gentle press out. You can increase that tension, just making sure you're still breathing. Kind of noticing if you have one hip that feels a little tighter, or if you notice the difference between where the hips are tight, if there's any compensation from side to side. And we'll cross that left leg all the way over. So my left leg's on top, and I'm gonna let my legs fall to the right. And then sweep that arm up and over. And again, you can always uncross. This feels like too much in the low back here. Move with the arm position. And then gently rolling back onto your back here. You can lengthen the legs out, take one more little stretch, arms overhead. So you've got a couple ways you can get up here. We can do a nice controlled roll up. If you want to do a roll to the side and support yourself up, that's also an option. Or if you want to keep the energy up a little bit, you can draw your legs into your chest and then take a couple rock and rolls to sit. And here's our COVID massage technique. One more like that. Nice. And I'll leave you guys there. Thanks for coming. Yeah, have a good rest of your Friday. Is that feeling a little mobility? Thank you.